Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids. I've been away for a weekend now. You guys probably haven't even noticed because I have had some videos up front for you guys. But we're back and we're going to get straight into some more unit reviews. This time we're going to be looking at the Screamer Killer. Now the Screamer Killer had a new model this edition. So we're going to get into the datasheet and of course give a Planet 40k rating at the end of the video. Right, so let's get into the rear side of the data card. 180 points for the model. That's quite expensive when you're comparing this thing to the horror specs, for example. Even to the Screamer Killer in 9th edition, which was only 130 points. So it has gone up 50 points. That's quite a lot. Now there is also another bit of a nerf to the data card right here. You can only have one Screamer Killer as a unit composition, whereas in 9th edition you could have up to 3 of them. So they are now taken in singles. So they're slightly changed in the way they are going to work now. Well, the model is equipped with the Bioplasmic Scream and the Screamer Killer Talons. So let's flip this card over and we're going to be checking out the statistics to begin and comparing to 9th edition, because we're still in the launch index of course. So the movement has gone down from 10 inches to 8 inches, so that's kind of standard for all the monsters that are not, the fast versions if you like, not the Trigons and things like that. Everything is now moving 8 inches instead of 10. The toughness, however, has gone up to toughness 9. It used to be toughness 7, but that's again kind of standard for monsters. You would expect that. So toughness 9 there. 2+ armor save is as it was. Wounds has gone up to wounds 10. It was 9. That's not bad for us. Leadership 8+, and objective control is quite low. It's only 3. So the leadership being 8+, yes, it's a problem, but if it's within Synapse, it's not really a problem. It's just getting it within Synapse is, I suppose, the problem. But to be honest with you, it's not the be-all and end-all. This thing isn't really looking for objectives. And in terms of stratagems and falling back, yeah, you could use stratagems, I guess, but you're not going to be falling back with it. So it's not that big of a deal, really. Now we're going to move into the ranged attacks because it's got the Bioplasmic Scream, which it used to have in 9th edition. It is still an assault weapon, but it's also now been given the blast keyword. So for when you're firing at a unit, if they've got 5 models, you get an extra attack. If they've got 10 models, it's an extra 2 attacks, and so on. So that is going to assist you with the larger units. I mean, even a 5-man unit of Terminators will give you an extra shot there. But ideally, you're looking at the 1 wound models because, well, we're going to explain now, in fact. So the attacks is D6 + 3. It used to be D6, so we're getting 3 additional attacks plus the D6, of course, which is a bit random. Ballista skill 4+, which is as it was. Strength 8 is also as it was. The AP went down because the AP has been reset in 7th edition. It's now only AP 2. Well, -2, and the damage is just 1. So this tells me this is a screen remover, if you like. Not necessarily a light infantry because it does have strength 8. So it could be toughness 4. It could be even Space Marines, intercessors, maybe not even intercessors, infiltrators perhaps that have got into concealed positions with the infiltrate ability. Maybe you could be removing those kind of models or minimizing them down to a lower amount. Now the damage only being 1 means you're going to have to get quite a few of them through to be removing Space Marine models, but realistically you want to be taking out 1 move models. Now the melee weapon is the Screamer Killer Talons, which is of course as it used to be as well. So this is 10 attacks, that's as it was. Weapon skill 3+ as it was. The strength used to be strength 6, it's now strength 10. So we've got 10 strength 10 attacks, which is pretty nasty. Pretty nasty. AP is -2, was -3, that's okay. And the damage is a flat 3. So this is literally ripping open Terminator models without the Storm Shields, of course, because if you have a Storm Shield, they're going to be 4 wound models, which isn't ideal for a Screamer Killer. But 3 wound models, absolutely perfect. With 10 attacks, strength 10, you're wounded on 2s, and the AP, well, it likely goes on an invulnerable save anyway, so it's all you really need there. So yeah, it's a pretty decent melee weapon, to be fair. Again, in the back of my mind though, I'm kind of thinking about that horror specs. I know the strength isn't as good as that. I think they've only got strength 7, but there's 14 attacks. There's a little bit of a comparison going there, so we'll get onto that maybe in a moment. Right, onto the ability side of the data card, we've got the Deadly Demise 1. I think it used to be 3 inches. It's now, of course, 6 inches because it's a core rule. Synapse is the faction core rule, and it has to be within Synapse, of course. It's not got the Synapse keyword. Again, I don't think that's too big of a deal for a Screamer Killer, unless you're looking at stratagems, which we'll go over in a moment as well. And the unique ability, Death Scream. In your shooting phase, after this model has shot, select one enemy unit, or select one unit that was hit by one or more of these attacks, That unit must then take a battle shock test, subtracting 1 from their test. So the likelihood is you are going to hit because you're going to have d6 plus 3 attacks in the shooting phase. So that's a minimum of 4. If you can't hit with 4 dice as a minimum with ballistic skill 4+, then you've got really bad dice. Get them changed. So you will be hitting, forcing a battle shock test. Is it the biggest thing? Not really, not really. I mean, it's only really when it comes to stratagems again, and maybe objective control with the secondary objectives perhaps, because for the primaries it's not that big of a deal, because as soon as their turn comes around, if they're not below half strength, then they're not taking battle shock. They're fine. So it's only really for the secondaries that relate to the end of the turn perhaps. Now unfortunately the Screamer Killer has lost a number of abilities. We've got the Armored Ecoskeleton. It used to have a -1 to damage. It's lost that. The Blistering Assault ability, which the Carnifexes actually do have some sort of resemblance to this ability. They've lost that one. And Terrifying, which I think it should have kept this one. So it's subtracting 1 from the enemy leadership, which would in fact be a +1 to the leadership because 10th edition is different for every model that we destroy in a unit. So that would kind of work hand in hand with Battle Shock, I suppose, but we've lost that ability, so you can just ignore me there. Don't worry about it. And Monstrous Brood, of course, there's only 1 model now in the unit, so it makes no odds. But going back to those ranged and melee attacks, I want to talk about, well, first of all, the hyper adaptations, and then of course a stratagem to relate to that. So the hyper adaptations is where you've got your 3 options pre-game. Whether it's going against infantry and swarm, you can have sustained hits 1, hyper aggression for lethal hits against monsters and vehicles, and hive predators for critical hits. For the precision ability, when you score a critical hit against characters, that's hive predators, and you're going to be selecting one of those pre-game. Now, when you get to see your opponent's list, if you see a lot of infantry, of course, you're taking swarming instincts, you want to sustain hits 1. If you see a lot of vehicles, of course, lethal hits, and so on. You know the coup, right? Now, this is kind of going to be important because, well, I think the stratagem, I'll put it up on the screen for you now. Adrenal Surge. It's 2 command points. You can get it for free by other means. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. In the fight phase, you can select 2 Tyranid units that are within Synapse or 1 that isn't within Synapse. And you can score critical hits on a 5+ rather than a 6+. So if you go back to the Swarming Instincts ability, with sustained hits 1 against infantry, that will be now scored on a 5+, not a 6+, and you've got 10 attacks, bearing in mind with your melee weapon, that's strength 10. So if you were going up against Terminators perhaps, you're going to potentially get more, well, a third of those dice are going to be additional attacks, which is kind of cool. It's kind of cool. You could be potentially moving a couple more Terminators just from that alone. You never know. So yeah, that is the abilities, as well as the hive adaptations, I suppose. Let's move in to the battlefield role. What do I believe the battlefield role is for the Screamer Killers? So I've got on the screen for you what I think about the battlefield role is for the Screamer Killers. They're either a first wave or a second wave of attack, depending on what other units you've got in your list. If you've got a load of Carnifexes or One Eye, the Swarm Lord, Hive Tyrant, whatever you want as your first wave, you know, it's going to be the first or second wave potentially. It depends on what you've got, really. The second thing I've got here is that they're a huge distraction. I mean, your opponent is going to know that they're going to be 180 points. They're also going to know they're going to be pretty lethal in combat. You know, 10 strength 10 melee attacks at damage 3. They're not going to like that, so they're going to want to be getting rid of it. So it's going to have a target on its back from early doors. If you're not using it as a first or second wave attack, there's other ways of using it, such as a mid-table objective bully. If you've got a unit that's, again, infiltrated onto a mid-ground objective, and you've got a unit such as a Screamer Killer, you can, instead of bowling towards your enemy, backlines or deployment zone, you could instead go towards that no man's land objective and start bullying them off of that objective. Yes, you've only got objective control 3, but you're now going to start seriously removing their models. They're not going to like that. Again, I think a Horospex is probably better at that thing to do with that battlefield role, but you've got the option with the Screamer Killers. The range attack from the Bioplasmic Scream is going to be a pretty decent removal for screens. So you could be removing a screen, it could be some gaunts, whatever, remove that screen and then make the charge move with your, again, 10 strength 10 melee attacks, which are really good against 3 wound infantry. So if you've got Terminators without the shields, they are very ideal because every single one that goes through will remove a model. It's also going to be useful for vehicles, of course. I mean, damage 3 against vehicles is pretty good. Unless they're toughness 11 onwards, then you are slightly struggling because you need 5s to wound. Onto a couple of stratagems that are available to the Screamer Killer. The first one, of course, rapid regeneration. We can't go through a video without mentioning this one. If you're within Synapse, you get a 5+ Feel No Pain save. Otherwise, it's a 6+. You're not really bothered about the 6+ unless you're using little gaunts and bugs. But if you are using a monster such as the Screamer Killer, you want to get it within Synapse to use this with the stratagem. If you can't get it within Synapse, then don't really bother using the stratagem on this model. The other one, we just mentioned it, Adrenal Surge. It is 2 command points, but if you've got a Hive Tyrant with Will of the Hive Mind, you could potentially have it for free, which is also very nice. Critical hits on a 5+ rather than a 6. Maybe it's sustained hits, maybe it's lethal hits, depending on what you've selected. And another one that I don't usually talk about, which is Overrun. I think it's quite useful for a model like this. So this is in your fight phase, just before your unit consolidates. You can consolidate 6 inches instead of 3 inches, providing that you end your move in unit coherency or within engagement range. You'll always be within unit coherency because it's only one model. But if you can get within engagement range, then fantastic. With a 6-inch move, don't forget. So that's quite a large amount to go. And if you're within Synapse range, potentially you are, potentially you're not, depends on where you are on the battlefield. You can then just do a normal move for 6 inches rather than do that consolidation move. So you can go in any direction. Maybe you want to head to an objective, maybe you want to head to another juicy target. Whatever you want to do, it's just one command point, and then if the situation arises, there you go, you take it. Right, so moving into the pros and cons for the Screamer Killer. Start with the pros. They're forcing Battle Shock, add a -1 to the Battle Shock test, which is, it's okay. Situational, but it's okay. You've got 10 strength 10 attacks, which I think is quite nice. It's quite good. And with 3 damage each one is also very nice. I mean, they're going to be better against 3 wound models, as we mentioned anyway. Terminators are a prime example without the shields, because they're only 3 wound models. Perfect for those. And they're removing screens pre-charge at range with the Bioplasmic Scream. As for the cons, they're quite expensive for what they actually do. 180 points for some attacks, 10 attacks that are decent, and you're forcing Battle Shock. I think it's a lot of points for just doing that. I think you get your value in other units. Again, the Horus Vex, maybe even Carnifexes. You get a bit more value in other monsters. So that's a big con in my opinion. They've lost some of the 9th edition abilities that we mentioned earlier in this video, which made this thing much more usable in 9th edition. You can only take them in singles now as well, so you're not necessarily guaranteed to get this thing into melee, because if you've only got one of them and it gets targeted, it's quite easy to take it down if it's just the one. It's competing with the Horus Vex, which I think is the major flaw here. The Horus Vex is 125 points, and then you're saving a ton of points on something else, and the Horus Vex is virtually doing the same work. Yes, it is only strength 7. You get more attacks though. I just think it's doing the same sort of levels of work in my opinion. And finally, they're not as useful against 4 wound models. So the Terminators with the shields or the Custodes, anything that's 4 wounds, you need 2 of these wounds to go through just to remove a model. And then a lot of damage is going to go to waste, so it's not as efficient. Also 2 wound models, it's just overkill. You're paying attacks for this kind of model, a premium, 180 points to have that kind of damage. And if you're killing 2 wound models and those extra damages are not spilling onto the next model, because that's not how it works, you're just paying too much for what it's actually doing. So with all that being said, let's get on to my Planet 40k rating. If it wasn't for the Horus Vex, I think this would be decent. It would be pretty good, it would be pretty high up. But because we do have the Horus Vex available, it can't be. It can't be that high up. So I'm just going to go with an average 3-star rating. You could argue potentially less, 2.5 star potentially. I think that would be it'd be a little bit harsh. So I'm going to go with a 3-star for today. So guys, that is the end of the video. You have to let me know your comments down below, what you think you would give it. And yeah, make sure you are subscribed to the channel on your exits. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.